I always thought intelligence was something that, well, required a brain. But get this, what if I told you that even bacteria, those tiny single-celled organisms, might be making decisions? It completely blew my mind when I first read about it.
It's a truly revolutionary idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
It forces us to reconsider what we even mean by cognition.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We've got a Twitter thread that summarizes a fascinating scientific paper called Grounding Cognition, Hierarchical Control Mechanisms in Biology, plus excerpts from the paper itself. So, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What exactly are these scientists proposing?
Well, the paper starts by making a crucial distinction between production mechanisms and control mechanisms. Production mechanisms are basically the workhorses of the cell, carrying out essential tasks. In bacteria, this could be something like protein synthesis, or using their flagella to move around.
So those are the actions, the doing part. But what about the control mechanisms? Where do they fit in?
That's where things get really interesting. Control mechanisms are what regulate those production mechanisms. They're the decision makers, constantly responding to information and choosing a course of action. Even in single-celled organisms, we see this incredible ability to make choices based on their environment.
Okay, so even bacteria have a sort of internal command center. That's pretty wild. But what kind of decisions are we talking about here? Give me an example.
The paper highlights two really compelling examples. One is bacterial chemotaxis, which is how bacteria move towards food sources or away from harmful substances.
So it's like they have a built-in GPS system that guides them towards the good stuff and away from danger.
Exactly. They sense the concentration of different chemicals in their surroundings and use that information to decide which way to swim.
Wow. And I thought finding my way around a new city was complicated. What's the other example they mentioned?
The other one is protein synthesis. Bacteria are constantly making decisions about which proteins to produce based on their current needs. It's a dynamic process that allows them to adapt to changing conditions.
So it's like they're running a miniature factory inside themselves, constantly evaluating what needs to be built and adjusting their production accordingly.
Precisely. And what's fascinating is the complexity of these control mechanisms. For example, in bacterial chemotaxis, there's this process called methylation of chemotaxis proteins. Essentially, this allows the bacteria to adjust their sensitivity to different chemicals, fine-tuning their responses based on the concentration levels.
Okay, so not only can they detect these chemicals, but they can also modulate how strongly they react to them. That's pretty sophisticated for something so tiny.
It really is. And this intricate decision-making isn't just a top-down process. It's organized in a fascinating way called...
Wait, hold on. Before you explain that, I need to catch my breath. This is a lot to take in. We're talking about bacteria making decisions, adjusting their behavior, and basically acting like tiny intelligent beings. It's incredible.
It is. And it gets even more incredible when we look at how these control mechanisms are structured. The paper describes them as being hierarchical.
Hierarchical? That's a mouthful. What does that even mean?
It means that instead of a rigid hierarchical structure with one boss calling all the shots, control is distributed. Imagine a team working together where everyone has a say and decisions are made collaboratively.
So it's more like a decentralized network than a pyramid?
Exactly. And this hierarchical organization is crucial for bacteria because it allows them to be incredibly flexible and resilient in ever-changing environments. They can quickly adapt to new challenges and make decisions based on the most up-to-date information.
That makes sense. If they were stuck in a rigid hierarchy, they might not be able to react quickly enough to survive in such dynamic environments.
Precisely. And the paper uses some great analogies to illustrate how these hierarchical control mechanisms can evolve over time. They talk about adding kludges, which are essentially small modifications or workarounds that are added to the system as needed.
So it's like they're constantly tinkering with their internal systems, adding new features and tweaking things as they go along. It's like evolution in action, always adapting and refining.
Absolutely. And speaking of evolution, one of the most mind-blowing examples in the paper is the concept of circadian rhythms in bacteria.
Wait, bacteria have internal clocks. Are you serious?
I am completely serious. The paper highlights cyanobacteria as the prime example. They have this intricate molecular mechanism called the Chi protein system that actually tracks the light-dark cycle.
Hold on. So these tiny bacteria have a sense of time. They know when it's day and night without even having eyes or a brain.
It's incredible, isn't it? And this internal clock isn't just a novelty. It allows them to make crucial decisions about gene expression even when there are no external cues. They're anticipating what's coming next and preparing themselves accordingly.
Wow, they're like miniature time travelers. But how does this all connect back to the bigger picture of cognition? What are the authors really trying to say here?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it brings us to the heart of what makes this paper so revolutionary. They're arguing that this biogenic perspective, as they call it, challenges our very notion of what it means to be cognitive.
So they're saying that our traditional human-centered view of intelligence might be too narrow, that we've been overlooking the incredible diversity of intelligence that exists all around us.
Exactly. If even bacteria, these supposedly simple organisms, exhibit such complex decision-making abilities, it raises profound questions about the nature of intelligence itself.
It's like we've been looking at the world through the wrong lens. We've been so focused on our own type of intelligence that we've failed to recognize the incredible intelligence inherent in all life forms.
It really does make you wonder, doesn't it? If even bacteria exhibit decision-making, what does that tell us about the potential for intelligence in other, perhaps even more unexpected places?
That's a thought-provoking question, and one that I'm sure our listeners will be pondering as well. But before we get too carried away with those bigger questions, let's take a closer look at some of the specific examples from the paper. I'm particularly interested in the idea of heterarchy and how it might have played a role in the evolution of more complex cognitive systems.
That's a fascinating area to explore. What's so intriguing about heterarchy is that it might offer a glimpse into how more complex cognitive systems, like our own brains, could have evolved.
You mean our brains could be built upon these ancient fundamental principles of distributed control?
It's a compelling idea.
Hmm.
Imagine those early single-celled organisms making decisions through these hierarchical networks. Over millions of years, these networks could have become more complex, more interconnected, eventually giving rise to the intricate structures we see in the brain.
So instead of a sudden leap from simple to complex, it's more like a gradual building upon these existing mechanisms. That makes a lot of sense. It's like those kludges we were talking about earlier, but on a grander scale.
Exactly. And if we think about it, a hierarchical system has a lot of advantages. It's adaptable, resilient, and can process information from multiple sources simultaneously, all pretty crucial for survival, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. But this raises an important question for me. If we're seeing decision-making in bacteria, and we're suggesting it might be the foundation for more complex intelligence, does that mean our current definition of intelligence is too limited?
That's the crux of the matter, isn't it? We often define intelligence based on human capabilities, things like language, abstract thought, problem solving. But this research suggests that there are many ways for organisms to be smart and adapt to their environments.
So maybe instead of asking, what is intelligence, we should be asking,
how is intelligence expressed in different forms across the spectrum of life?
Wow, that's a beautiful way to put it. Each organism with its own unique set of challenges and adaptations, showcasing a different facet of intelligence. It really makes you appreciate the incredible diversity of life on Earth.
And it highlights the importance of studying intelligence from a broader perspective. Instead of just focusing on the human brain, we need to look at the incredible variety of cognitive systems that exist in nature.
So this isn't just about bacteria, it's about expanding our understanding of intelligence as a whole.
Precisely. And this has implications for how we study other animals, how we approach artificial intelligence, even how we think about the possibility of extraterrestrial life.
Okay, let's break that down. First, other animals. If we accept that intelligence isn't limited to brains, what does that mean for how we study animal cognition?
It means we need to be more open-minded in our research. We need to look for evidence of decision-making, problem-solving, and adaptability in creatures that we might have previously dismissed as simple or unintelligent.
So don't underestimate the intelligence of a slug just because it doesn't have a big brain.
Exactly. We might be surprised by what we find if we look closely enough. And speaking of surprises, this research also has some fascinating implications for the field of artificial intelligence.
Okay, how does this connect to AI?
Well, if bacteria can make decisions without a brain, it challenges our assumptions about what's required for intelligence. It suggests that we don't necessarily need to replicate the human brain to create intelligent machines.
Could this mean that studying bacterial control mechanisms could inspire new approaches to AI?
Absolutely. Imagine if we could develop AI systems that are based on the principles of hierarchy, distributed control, and adaptability. We might be able to create machines that are more robust, more flexible, and better able to learn and evolve.
That's amazing. It's like looking to these ancient organisms for inspiration in developing cutting-edge technology.
It's a reminder that nature often has the best solutions to complex problems. And who knows, maybe these insights could even help us in our search for extraterrestrial life.
Now, that's really getting into the realm of science fiction, but you're right. If intelligence can exist in such diverse forms here on Earth, why couldn't it exist in even more bizarre and unexpected forms out there in the universe?
Exactly. We might be limiting ourselves by assuming that alien life wouldn't necessarily have brains or think in ways that are familiar to us.
So we need to keep an open mind and be prepared to be surprised.
Absolutely. The universe is full of wonders, and our understanding of intelligence is just beginning to scratch the surface.
This is all incredibly fascinating, but it's also a bit overwhelming. If we can't even agree on a definition of intelligence, how can we possibly hope to understand it, let alone replicate it?
That's the beauty of science, isn't it? It's about embracing the unknown and constantly questioning our assumptions. And the more we learn about the incredible diversity of life, both here on Earth and potentially beyond, the closer we'll get to understanding the true nature of intelligence.
I love that. This deep dive has taken us on a wild ride, from the inner workings of bacteria to the very nature of intelligence itself. And what I find so inspiring is the sense of connection it creates. If these fundamental principles of decision-making are shared by all life forms, it really highlights the interconnectedness of everything on this planet.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it?
It really is. And it makes me even more curious to explore these ideas further. But before we wrap up, I want to come back to the source material for a moment. The authors of the paper end with a pretty thought-provoking question.
Oh, yes, they ask. Oh, yes, they ask. If decision-making is this fundamental to life itself, could there be other forms of intelligence out there that we haven't even begun to imagine?
It's like they're throwing down a gauntlet, challenging us to broaden our horizons even further.
And I think it's a challenge we should embrace. We've already seen how our traditional view of intelligence might be too narrow. If bacteria can make decisions without brains, what else might be possible? What other ways of sensing, processing information, and interacting with the world might constitute intelligence?
It's mind-boggling to consider. Maybe we've been looking for intelligence in all the wrong places. We've been searching for something that looks and thinks like us. But what if intelligence takes on completely different forms in other environments?
Imagine the possibilities. Life in the depths of the ocean, for example, facing immense pressure, darkness, and limited resources. What kinds of adaptations and strategies might have evolved there? Could those constitute a form of intelligence we haven't even considered?
It makes you wonder if we're even equipped to recognize these other forms of intelligence. What if they operate on timescales that are too slow or too fast for us to perceive, or communicate in ways that we can't even detect?
It's a humbling thought, isn't it? We tend to think of ourselves as the pinnacle of intelligence. But what if we're just one tiny branch on a vast tree of cognitive diversity?
This deep dive has definitely given me a whole new perspective on intelligence, that's for sure. It's made me realize that intelligence isn't just about having a big brain or being able to solve complex equations. It's about the ability to adapt, to make decisions, to interact with the world in meaningful ways. And that's something that exists in all sorts of incredible forms throughout the natural world.
And who knows, maybe someday we'll even discover those other forms of intelligence the authors hinted at. Maybe they'll be right here on Earth, hidden in plain sight. Or maybe they'll be out there among the stars, waiting for us to broaden our definition of what it means to be intelligent.
It's an exciting prospect, and one that I'm sure we'll revisit on future deep dives. But for now, I think we've given our listeners a lot to chew on. What do you think about the idea of cognition existing beyond the brain? Does it challenge your assumptions about intelligence? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Head over to our social media channels and let us know what you think.
And be sure to join us next time as we take a deep dive into one particular form of intelligence that's been generating a lot of buzz lately: artificial intelligence.
Until then, keep those minds open and stay curious.